Imagine one person becoming so wealthy that their fortune rivals entire cities, influences governments, funds space exploration, and shapes technologies billions use every day. Sounds like science fiction? Yet, in 2026, that conversation became reality. Elon Musk became the world's first modern trillionaire on paper, and it raises a fascinating question. Should anyone possess that much power? Bold opinions, real evidence, and lasting impact. This is Rod's Scholarly Opinion. I am your host, Rodney McNeil, where we break down the real issues shaping our world through a lens that is opinionated, yet grounded in credible evidence and critical thought. I am sure you all have probably heard by now, Elon Musk is the world's first trillionaire on paper in our modern era. His 42% stake in SpaceX added about 180 billion to his portfolio when the company went public on June 12th of 2026. He's not walking around with $1 trillion in liquid cash on his card, but his fortune is tied up in equity and stocks. Musk has 717 million shares in Tesla, or $280 billion. Neuralink in the Boring Company adds a few more $1 billion each to his wealth. This is massive, and most people cannot fathom what it means to have $1 trillion. Most people understand $1 million and can somewhat imagine $1 billion. However, $1 trillion is in another financial stratosphere. The scale problem. What is the difference between a million, billion, and $1 trillion? Let's put these numbers into perspective. If you earned $1,000 1,000 times, you would have $1 million. Now take that 1 million that you earned and do it again 1,000 times. Now you have $1 billion. Again, take the $1 billion you earned, do it again 1,000 times. Now you have $1 trillion. Let me try and help you all grasp these numbers in a different way in terms of time. Notice the size difference. 1 million seconds comes out to 11 and a half days. 1 billion seconds is about 32 years. And 1 trillion seconds is about 31,700 years. Wow. Do you all notice the huge gaps between those numbers? By this illustration and comparison, we can clearly see $1 trillion is a number of astronomical proportions. Why do human beings struggle to comprehend wealth on that scale? Perhaps numerical cognition could help us understand why our brains perceive, represent, and process numbers and mathematical concepts in such a limited way. Our minds are wired to digest numbers in small amounts intuitively, meaning it does not take conscious reasoning to tell the difference between 5, 10, 20, or $100. The more massive the numbers become, the harder it is to recognize a distinction. For example, it would be impossible at first glance to differentiate between 30,000 and 90,000 people. A billion and $1 trillion are not common numbers that we experience in our lives. These figures are so large they become abstract measurements that take time to comprehend. What we can relate to is spending. If you had $1 million and you spent $1,000 a day, it would take you 2 years and 9 months to run out of money. Same analogy, spending $1,000 a day with $1 billion in your account would take you 2,739.7 years to blow through it. Finally, it would take 2,739,726 years to spend $1 trillion. You could not live enough lifetimes to spend all of that money. Talk about being set for life and the people in your family that inherit your wealth. How does $1 trillion compare to the budget of cities, states, and even nations? Being part of the Trillionaire Club means you would have more money than some of your favorite cities like Miami, $300 billion budget, or Dallas Fort Worth, $800 billion. Your wealth would be equivalent to LA, $1.2 trillion, but less than New York's $2 trillion. On the state level, only Texas, California, and New York has significantly more than $1 trillion, while the nations of Switzerland and Saudi Arabia barely eclipse $1 trillion. So, if $1 trillion represents a level of wealth most of us cannot even comprehend, why would anyone defend the existence of trillionaires? Surprisingly, many economists, entrepreneurs, and investors do. Evidence of a trillionaire might lead some to believe that capitalism works in our market. Capitalism is the economic system in which private individuals or businesses own the means of production, from the tools to the location. Private companies provide goods and services based on supply and demand in the general market. The goal is to make profit without control from the government. If an entrepreneur sees a need and invents a product or service that answers the need, should they be rewarded? After all, if we evaluate Musk's ventures, we will find out he was not trying to improve the market, but create solutions for complex problems. Tesla's electric cars provide clean, sustainable energy and transport by eliminating the use of fossil fuels for electric energy. In one capacity, it is a step forward toward reducing global warming while innovating the transportation industry. Instead of taking money from people, the need to solve complex problems created value that others saw worth investing in. Two engineers by the name of Martin Eberhard and Mark Tarpenning pitched the idea to Musk to invest capital into Tesla. From there, they raised more funds through two rounds of investments from people who believed in the value of the operation. Even the U.S. Department of Energy loaned money toward the initiative of producing the Model S and manufacturing plant. It is all history now because their investment paid off, and the loan was fully repaid with interest 3 years later. The point here is that ambitious entrepreneurs can create wealth versus extracting it from people. Innovative pursuits that solve systemic and environmental problems also provide jobs. Because Musk is our template, we can point to the 190,000 jobs created from his business. One of his peers in the space of entrepreneurship is Jeff Bezos. Through Amazon, he employs 1.5 million people. Not only that, but these companies have made some of their employees millionaires through the offering of stocks. Juan Hernandez joined SpaceX in 2015 as a welder and just recently became a millionaire because his 6,500 shares increased in value as the company went public. Overall, local economies can grow through the creation of jobs, supply chains from these large companies. As these companies continue to accumulate more wealth, their power and influence increase too. If society benefits from innovation, should we limit the rewards for creating it? What is the case against trillionaires? Anyone with $1 trillion is in a category of their own. They have become elite, referring to a small group of people with the privilege of holding the highest status, wealth, or power in society. Critics of trillionaires rarely argue that money itself is the problem. Their concern is something much larger: power. Because at a certain point, wealth stops being about purchasing things and starts becoming about influencing systems. Concentrated power is about a single entity or person with authority, control, or influence to make decisions for everyone. Whether it is a company or an individual with that type of wealth, whatever sector they operate in, they can control the following. Think about competition in the marketplace. Smaller companies do not stand a chance against juggernauts with capital because they can buy the little guys out or overshadow their presence. In other words, they can dominate the market by limiting choices for consumers and control the pricing of products and production. They can shape the rules and guide behavior in their industry by becoming the standard. Now, smaller competitors must follow their guidelines of production, operation, and where and how they can interact with consumers. Maybe someone wants to be just as ambitious by competing in the same industry. The powerful elite could make it too expensive, risky, or difficult to start or survive. Think of a company paying for the best space in retailers and leaving competition with little or no room for their products. Wealth concentration not only hinders competition, but it reduces economic dynamism. To put this in simple words, the economy will change, and the use of resources, labor, and capital should move toward the most productive supplier. This cannot happen if the wealthiest company or person buys competitors or limits their operation. Theoretically speaking, new businesses should disrupt and innovate their respective industries by pushing out the older and less efficient corporations. If not, the economy will not grow, innovation will slow, and employees' careers will not progress. At what point does economic success become political power? Economic success becomes political power when a person or entity's influence sits at the intersection of wealth, politics, technology, and media. The elite over time gain access to institutions, information, decision makers, and the ability to raise more capital. This type of access and resources enables a greater ability to inspire or drive change in elections, policy debates, lobbying, and public disclosure. Historically, governments were institutions that accumulated this level of influence. Today, some corporations and private individuals are reaching comparable levels of power. If governments once controlled infrastructure, scientific research, and communication networks, what happens when private corporations begin controlling all three? Governments have been largely responsible for infrastructure or systems that make modern life possible. Think about the highways you commute to work on, or the water you use to shower, your internet service provider, and the electric that powers your home. The federal, state, and local governments fund these systems by using taxpayers' money. They also create the laws that green lights projects as well as permits that stop anything from coming into fruition. As much as these people have a voice in democracy, there is a tension that exists between policies and efficiency. These typically take longer when the government gets involved. Nonetheless, they are the ones who sponsor scientific research. Space exploration has been funded by the government, granting NASA's research space program millions of dollars to improve autonomous navigation and next generation power supplies for trips to Mars. Today, private corporations own, operate, and influence these systems. These private firms fund their own studies in frontier technologies. SpaceX privately funded interplanetary colonization with the primary goal to allow humanity the opportunity to live on other planets, starting with Mars. For a moment, the company reframed the narrative in the eye of the public that traveling to Mars was not an if, but when and for how much reality. They continue to profoundly influence younger minds to choose STEM careers, turning their focus toward pop culture like goals of colonizing Mars. In another vein, if the population wants to stay connected, they can use Starlink service providers, especially if they are in rural areas. Momentum of this magnitude also influences the government. NASA relies on SpaceX to transport astronauts to the International Space Station. The Pentagon employs SpaceX to launch security payloads into space to enable global communications, missile tracking, and early warning detection. In a bizarre manner, the relationship experiences friction and pushback. The Federal Aviation Administration, known as the FAA, does not like the move fast and break things philosophy, so they regulate and slow down launches that seem unsafe. Of course, the founder expresses his thoughts about the slow process of obtaining a permit. Having wealth this massive affords you the platform to amplify and remove content and what the public encounters. Once you start to influence what millions of people see, hear, and discuss, it is safe to say you are operating like a quasi government. That is the blend of government and private business characteristics. Money and wealth are catalysts, but what does money mean to us as a society? Are we obsessed with money? Having money and wealth is one thing. $1 trillion is extreme wealth. Why are we fascinated by extreme wealth? My thoughts about our American society being obsessed with wealth and money can be traced back to the ideology of, you guessed it, the American dream. You might hear things like, anyone, regardless of your background, if you are ambitious enough, if you work hard enough, can achieve limitless success and wealth. But you must be determined and you must outwork everybody. Material success and money are viewed as symbols of freedom, hard work, and a source of happiness. The media only heightens this obsession by celebrating individuals amassing large net worths. In that sense, the media celebrates celebrities. The media only heightens our fascination with wealth by celebrating those who accumulate it. We follow billionaires, celebrities, athletes, and entrepreneurs because wealth has become a cultural scoreboard. The richer someone becomes, the more successful we assume they are. Social media amplifies this effect. Luxury lifestyles, private jets, exclusive events, and massive business deals are constantly displayed for public consumption. As a result, wealth becomes associated with freedom, status, intelligence, and influence. But financial success does not constitute wisdom across all areas of life. Many wealthy individuals gain influence far beyond their area of expertise. Their opinions on politics, education, technology, and society often carry significant weight because people associate wealth with authority. The result is a fascinating cycle. Wealth creates visibility, visibility creates influence, and influence creates even more power. A trillionaire is not only influencing the public, but they are creating infrastructure, rules, and shifting the economy. It is not just a large sum of money, but it is the responsibility that comes with control. A trillionaire is no longer simply participating in society, they are helping shape it. Their companies influence infrastructure, their platforms influence communication, their investments influence innovation, their decisions influence economies. At that scale, wealth is no longer merely money, it becomes a form of power. Who should hold trillionaires accountable? Governments answer to voters, public officials answer to elections, corporations answer to shareholders, but when an individual's influence rivals governments themselves, who should they ultimately answer to? The answer is more simple than people realize. Everyone a trillionaire affects is the people who hold him accountable, his partners and investors, the people who support his company, who buy goods and services, the people affected by his influence on communication, the economy, and policies. Throughout this episode, we have discussed money, but perhaps the real subject has been power. We admire wealth because we associate it with freedom, influence, and success. But if someone possesses enough wealth to rival governments, perhaps the question is not whether trillionaires should exist. Perhaps the trillionaire question is not whether someone should possess that much wealth. Perhaps the real question is what we believe wealth is ultimately for: power, progress, freedom, legacy, or something else entirely. This has been another episode of Rod's Scholarly Opinion, where we challenge perspectives, demand evidence, and speak on what truly matters. I am Rodney McNeil. Stay informed, stay critical, and I'll catch you on the next one.